Good day, I am Omar Gamos from SDO City of Malolos. Today, we are going to talk about the principles of design. So, at the end of this session, you will be able to identify the types of illustration to be used in your graphic design. There are three important parts of a storybook and/or module: the manuscript, the artistic elements, and the layout. These three must always work together as one. The writer, illustrator, and the layout artist must have an agreement on how their final output would look like. Before we continue, let me share with you the words of Milton. If you're not failing every now and again, it's a sign you're not doing anything very innovative. When I joined the 3rd National Storybook Competition, let me tell you, winning was never too easy. I failed twice before I won the Illustrator's Prize Award in my 3rd attempt. Thank God he sent me my angels who pushed me to try joining the competition once more. Ma'am Edith Caparas and Ma'am Arnelia Trajano, my division EPS. So I am telling you, this, too, is not easy. But don't be afraid to fail, and try, and try, and try until you finally succeed. Moving forward, we can basically divide the types of illustration based on the technique used into two large groups: the traditional illustration and the modern style. The first one, in the traditional illustration, is the woodcutting. It is an Asian technique which you can see in some of the world's oldest surviving manuscripts. It was popular during the Middle Ages and became the illustration type of choice after the invention of the printing press. Carved block illustrations made it possible for mass-produced books to have beautiful illustrations all printed from the same master cutting. Distinctive for the technique are the contrasting colors, if any. The contrast between the dark and light areas in the illustration, as well the relatively big strokes. It is still preferred technique of many contemporary illustrators who love the rougher feel and the textured look of these illustrations. Here's the link and the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration. Woodcut technique. Second is the metal etching. In traditional pure etching, a metal plate is covered with a waxy ground which is resistant to acid. The artist then scratches off the ground with a pointed etching needle where he or she wants a line to appear in the finished piece, so exposing the bare metal. The plate is then dipped in a bath of acid. The acid bites into the metal where it is exposed, leaving behind lines sunk into the plate. The remaining ground is then cleaned off the plate. The plate is inked all over, and then the ink wiped off the surface, leaving only the ink in the etched lines. The plate is then put through a high-pressure printing press together with a sheet of paper, and the paper picks up the ink from the etched lines, making a print. Depending on the metal etching technique used, the illustration can look like a watercolor or it can look like pencil drawing, with a very fine lines and hatching. Here's the link of the QR code and the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration. Metal etching. The third one is the pencil illustration. Maybe one of the most popular types of illustration is the pencil one. It is rich material which allows you creating soft shadows and transitions, as well creating sharp, accurate lines. Sometimes, illustrators choose to keep the pencil sketch very loose and to drop with a pencil. Later on, they finish off the illustration with another material. Now I want to share one of my winning illustrations for the 3rd National Storybook Writing Competition. At first, I was a little afraid of using the pencil illustrations because I think that most of my competitors will be using the modern styles. But my final decision was to raise the bar of my illustrations. I tried this type because I think it will be unique and I can also express my art more freely in this kind of medium. And then after failing twice using the medium that I am not really comfortable to use, the modern style, I did it. Here is the link and the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration. Pencil illustration. Fourth is a charcoal illustration. Charcoal illustrations are often not as precise as pen and pencil illustrations, but are a prepared choice for illustrating short stories, fast sketches, nooks. Charcoal's bendability lets the artist create a range of textures, representing materials and shadows, people, objects, and the natural world. Artists often use fingers and tissues to blend the soft material, smudge, and create smooth and soft shadows. At the left side, you can see how the artist made very fine detailing of a human face. Probably, the main difference compared to the pencil illustration is that the line of the charcoal is always slightly thicker, softer, and darker in quality. Here is the link and the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration. Charcoal illustration. Lithography. Lithography comes from the Greek word for stone. Originally, the technique used an image drawn with oil, fat, or wax onto the surface of a smooth, level lithographic limestone plate. Today, most types of high-volume books and magazines, especially when illustrated in color, are printed with offset lithography, which has become the most common form of printing technology since the 1960s. Here is the link and the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration, lithography illustration. Watercolor illustrations. In watercolor illustrations, the main thing is to use the color pigments and to create nuances and different transparencies by adding water to the color. The overall feeling of the watercolor illustration is soft, airy, with lots of depth. Illustrators prepare it for illustrating cookbooks, feminine and fashion types of illustration, children's book illustrations, as it is very light. It is one of the easiest ways of creating splashes of color, merging one into another. Common threads for the mentioned illustration styles. Here is a sample of watercolor illustration of Bet Parocha. Here is the link and the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration. Watercolor illustration. As a cousin of watercolor illustration, we can point out the gouache illustrations. Gouache paint is similar to watercolor modified to make it opaque. It offers rich, thicker, bit darker shades than watercolor and can be even reworked some years later. Commercial artists often use gouache for works such as posters, illustrations, comics, and for other design works. Most 20th century animations use it to create an opaque color on a cell with watercolor paint used for the backgrounds. Using gouache as poster paint is desirable for its speed as the paint layer dries completely with a relatively quick evaporation of the water. Here is the link and the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration, gouache illustration. The next type of illustration that we are going to look at is the acrylics illustration. Acrylics is one of the most preferred techniques for beginners. It is relatively easier to work with them than with watercolor or oils. Still, the artist can achieve both similar effects to oils and watercolors. One can paint with them on almost any kind of surface and they become water resistant once they are dry. These paints are very versatile as they also come as fluorescents, metallics, and other interesting effects. Here is the link and the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration, acrylics illustration. A little bit different from the last techniques we looked at is the collage illustration. Collage comes from the French word coller, which means to glue. It is a technique where the artwork is made from the assemblage of different forms, often from different materials, to form a new whole. This type of illustration is hugely popular in the recent years and even is considered as an inspiration for the big trend. material design. Often, illustrators use the shading from the different layers of their collage to achieve a beautiful 3D effect and to achieve depth. Here's the link and the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration, collage illustration. And last but not the least is the pen and ink illustration. Yes, not the least because this is the type of illustration that you are going to use in your modules. The styles mentioned a while ago are your options in creating your entry for the 4th National Storybook Writing Competition. Illustrating with ink allows the artist to create strong areas of contrast. Most of the illustrations are done by using one tint of ink on a light surface, which again helps achieving high contrasting pieces. Inks are widely accessible and affordable materials, easy to transport and to work expressively with. Maybe you remember the high contrast of the woodcut. Well, inking allows you to be more mobile and to create even finer lines. Here's the link of the QR code of the video that will show you a little bit of the work that goes behind such type of illustration, pen and ink illustration. As we discussed before, with the advancement of the electronics and stepping into the so-called digital era, the possibilities for artists to express themselves grew rapidly and more freely. The first electronic handwriting device was invented back in 1888. Since then, the technology became more sophisticated and many illustrators and designers are accustomed to using graphic tablets nowadays, devices which are connected to a computer. Artists use the tablet's pen and the surface to draw, and the device transfers the image in the open drawing software such as Photoshop, ArtRage, Inkscape, and other. The software programs imitate different traditional brushes, pen, various drawing tools, paper, and effects. We can divide illustrations produced digitally into two large groups: freehand digital illustrations and vector graphics. Freehand digital illustrations. As you can see, the freehand digital illustrations allow very smooth light and shadow transitions, making a complex background and a fine detail. Most of these illustrations are in a raster format and they can be scaled up and printed only to certain sizes before they lose quality. Vector graphics. In the other group, we put vector graphics or illustrations. The way the images are produced allows scaling them up and down to any size, without any quality loss. By rule, it is harder to make a smooth transition with vectors, but vector has its advantages in producing a certain style of imagery. This makes it very popular for web illustration. You can easily recognize the vector by its clear outlines, shapes, and definition. These are the options in choosing the types of illustration for a graphic design. This will be thoroughly discussed to you by the next speakers. Before we end this session, let me give you some words from Kimon Nicolaides. Learning to draw is really a matter of learning to see correctly. And that means a good deal more than merely looking with the eye. I wish you could all see the real essence of doing this online regional training workshop amidst the threat of COVID-19. Para sa bata, para sa bayan. I am Omar Gamos from SDO City of Malolos. Thank you very much and God bless Region 3.